Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Literary Hudson Valley. I'm so excited to be here with Jennifer Santiago and Janna Brooke Wallack. And we are here to discuss Janna's book, Naked Girl. This is an amazing book. Jennifer and Janna are going to have an amazing conversation. A little bit about Literary Hudson Valley. You may recognize me and Jen from Valley Girls podcast. This is our first spinoff episode of Literary Hudson Valley from Valley Girls. We have had authors on the show before on Valley Girls podcast, but Jen, being the book nerd that she is, would like to have authors on every single episode. So the idea came to have a spinoff about books and authors, especially local Hudson Valley authors. So here we are, first episode ever, Literary Hudson Valley, where Jen is going to talk about all things books and authors. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen. I will be here for some episodes, make little appearances, but mainly this is all Jen's gig. So take it away, Jen.
I think what you said was that you were going to be Ed McMahon.
I did. I am Ed McMahon to Jen's Johnny Carson. So,
which is an apt analogy because Ed McMahon really just sat there and just blew up Johnny and laughed at everything, even when it wasn't funny. And I feel like you're great at that. We're each other's best wing women. So
that's true. That is actually very accurate.
You need a distinctive, supportive laugh.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I do. Have you listened to the podcast? I chuckle a lot.
Good.
A lot.
Okay. Chuckle, cackle.
Yeah.
Same.
Chortle, whatever it is.
No, I love it. Okay. Also, I love this book. I love your debut novel, Naked Girl, so
Thank
much.
You.
I said on Instagram, I called it the book of the summer. And I was not exaggerating because this is exactly the kind of book I want to sink my teeth into for like summertime reading. But like Jenny said, we have lots of authors on the podcast. And in my old professional life, when I used to have a job that paid me money, I talked to lots of authors. But I've always primarily talked to nonfiction authors. So this is not just our first Literary Hudson Valley episode. This is also kind of a learning curve for me. And it felt very safe to do it with you because your book is really relatable and you and Jenny know each other. So I felt like Janna was our safe space because I'm learning how to talk about fiction in a way that I have so many questions that I want to ask you, but I also want everybody else to know that this is a great book, but I don't want to spoil anything for people who haven't yet read it. So it's an interesting balance of how to talk about your novel without giving away plot points that people will feel like, well, she just told me the whole book. Now I don't need to read it. So, but okay. So I am such a reader, and my to be read pile is infinitely longer than my remaining lifespan, even if I live to 120. So while I love books, I often am ready for a book to be over because I'm like, okay, I love this book, this is great. I want to get on to the next one. But this book did not feel like that. I didn't want it to end when it did. The characters really stay with you. And the whole time I was thinking, so we haven't talked about this yet, but we're the same generation. And so I'm guessing that you, like I, grew up on Judy Blume because this book is giving Judy Blume meets Barbara Kingsolver because there was like an element of...
I like that one. Yes.
So I just read Demon Copperhead recently, and it's, kind of an orphan story. And so there were some similarities just in the vibe with this book. But are you in fact a Judy Blume lover?
I am a Judy Blume lover, yes. And even more than a Judy Blume lover, I am a J.D. Salinger lover.
Okay.
Like to humiliating levels of rereading it, embarrassing amounts of time.
Okay.
And there's elements of that inspired this book as well. I mean, it didn't directly, but I mean, there's just no way that that's not threading in. Yeah, for me.
Okay, absolutely. The coming of age, Margaret? I see that for sure.
Come on. Yeah.
Although I will say, yes, I'll do props to Salinger, but this is infinitely more enjoyable to read. And yes, there is a lot of sadness. There are some very sad things that happen in the book. But, Catcher in the Rye, everybody raves about Catcher in the Rye. It's the best coming of age story ever. And I'm like, it's actually a story about somebody who's like profoundly depressed and not getting the help he needs.
It's my least favorite Salinger. I
Okay.
like all of the things that he writes about the Glass family. So Franny and Zoe
Mhm.
and Raise High the Roof Beams Carpenters and Seymour and Introduction. Everything he writes about the Glass family, I really relate to it. But they're also all profoundly depressed. So
Yeah.
yes, profound depression abounds, and that's not really what's going on in my book.
Yeah, I
So
feel like for people who are like, oh, Catcher in the Rye is so relatable, I'm like, maybe do you need a therapist? Are you okay? Which brings me back to Naked Girl, because this feels really relatable. And this is why I said it was giving me Judy Blume. It feels relatable in a way that it shouldn't, because I did not grow up anything like Sienna, who is the main protagonist. But there is an element of Sienna being the weird, imaginative girl that probably many of us were when we were growing up. And so that's why I was emotionally invested in Sienna from the first page. So I know you talked a little bit about how, like, yeah, I grew up in Florida and that's what inspired the book, but I didn't grow up like Sienna. So
right.
I think it's miraculous how relatable you made her, despite the fact that she comes from extremely different circumstances than we do.
What I say about the book, in terms of how it relates to me and my experience, because I guess people have said it reads like a memoir. And so people who like to read memoir might like to read the book, even though it's fiction. And I think it does read like a memoir. And I would say it mimics a lot of my childhood emotional experience, or was concerned about just that incredible inner monologue of the like young child and adolescent that parents and adults don't see from the outside, that a child is much more aware, complex, and a constant observer and recorder of what's going on around them, that adults think that a 5-year-old isn't getting it when your 5-year-old is getting it. They're getting it in a 5-year-old way. And I tried to write it that way. And I feel like in that way, it's relatable because every kid went through the childhood is riddled with anxiety. You're constantly under someone else's control, regardless of whether you want to eat that food or smell that air, or go to sleep at that time when you're not tired.
Yeah. And
So
her Sienna's responses to the anxieties that happen around her are retreating to her inner world, which is very imaginative and very funny and, sad, but also there's a lot of humor. So, all right, I promise I'm not going to give it any spoilers, but this is the prologue of the book, tells you the central drama of the book is that Sienna and her brother Siddhartha, who we call City, everyone calls City, their mother is dead. She died before they could even remember. And so the prologue starts out, this is why I'm telling you, I'm just going to read your words at you a little bit. This is why I'm telling you I was hooked from the first sentence, is that it starts out, I only have 5 pictures of my mother, and she's naked in 3 of them. I keep the photos in the bottom of my Bee Gees backpack in a jewelry box I took without permission. And if you look closely at the 5 pictures in order, you get almost the whole story. And then she proceeds to describe the first picture, a boudoir shot Jackson snapped. I recognize his chest trailing out of the frame and his penis in my mother's hand. And then we subsequently learn that Jackson is their father. So you kind of know right from the start, like, this is going to be an unconventional coming of age story, perhaps. So as we were saying, her inner life is so imaginative, and also your writing is beautiful and intriguing, and you want to hug this girl and you want to be her friend, but also you would just want to hang out with her or like want her to be your kid because she's so funny. She's so cute. So I'm just going to read a few little bits that I love so much. She loves Africa from the time that she's a very young little girl. She's obsessed with Africa. And so their dad comes in and says that they're going to go have an adventure. And she says, can we please go to Africa? I asked. Africa, the continent, had become my recent obsession. I planned to rule over a smallish kingdom curated from the bounds of my extremely limited frame of reference, the dusty box of National Geographics that came with our rental, a half-day visit to the Renaissance Fair at Vizcaya, Rikki Tikki Tavi, and Babar the elephant. My version of Africa was a mini utopia where animals wore fancy clothing and I was their queen. Like that is like
a good thought.
That's like every little girl that we ever know. Like I I could see myself in that.
Yeah. Who read Babar without picturing like having pet elephants and clothes?
I
That's
mean,
the best.
yeah. I mean, didn't we all grow up wanting the chipmunks to like feel our vibes and come and like talk to us because we looked at too many Beatrix Potter illustrations when we were kids
Well,
too?
Beatrix Potter, Disney, everybody's got a bird landing on their shoulder. Like everybody has animal friends that talk. It's so good.
You know, and when it doesn't happen in real life, it's kind of insulting. You're like, don't you know that I'm pure here?
Growing up is the ultimate disappointment.
Yeah. So I have a few themes that I kind of feel like I picked out in the book, and one of them is Sienna's longing for normalcy in a very unconventional life. As I said, they do not have a mom and they have an unconventional father, and we won't get into all of Jackson's exploits and the way that City and Sienna are subject to Jackson's bohemian lifestyle, shall we say, and possible forays into crime. But so it's very unconventional, and so she spends a lot of her time just longing for just a boring, normal life. So, I mean, do you feel like that's a natural reaction to the kind of lifestyle that she was having to live with this father of theirs?
I do, because I think also, at least in contemporary times, most children have TV and media all around them before phones, because this takes place in the 1980s. And but the TV, if you're turning on the TV and you're watching The Cosby Show and Growing Pains and and Family Ties and all of these, TVs that where like 80% of the entire show takes place in the living room of a family with parents who seem to always be home, always care, always be employed, always be setting out dinner. And you watch that and you live the way Sienna lives. And it's not a spoiler for me to say, because I do advertise the book with this, that she lives in her father's utopian love cult. That she would just be looking at this function on TV and then looking at her dysfunction and saying kind of, what, why? Can I go to school? Can I have a lunch in a lunchbox? Like, is that, everybody on TV gets that. That's like the bare minimum.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like she would wake up every day wondering why that's not happening ever.
Yeah. She says at one point, I wanted to be a regular girl with lip gloss, a nice haircut, and pretty ribbons adorning a set of neat braids. I wanted to be someone who had a kitchen with groceries in the cupboards and a school to attend, instead of one who hunted for quarters to spend on food and video games. Sneaking my dirty clothes into a stranger's wash, watching her fold them, and fantasizing that she was my mother made me hate Jackson even more for being such a quitter and for making me steal from people in order to take care of City. And it made me hate myself for not being smart enough to think of a better idea. That's so poignant. And also, I don't know how old she is at this point. This is 1985 in the book. So she's
13. She's 12.
So she's 12. She's longing for a mother of her own. She's at that really difficult age for a girl. But also, this is another theme throughout the book, the way that she just decides that it's her responsibility to mother City. And she has a lot of guilt about that. Yeah. She beats herself up often for the situations that they get placed in through no fault of her own, things she had no control over, but then she takes it really personally that she can't take better care of her brother. And that's heart-wrenching. You did a number on me with City, for real.
I think it's there's endless exceptions in nature with males and females, but I think that's kind of the difference between her and City, who's only like a year and a half younger than she is. They're really close together in age, is that she's also very female and he's very male. So it wouldn't really occur to him, being younger and male, to take care of her, that this nurturing is coming from, her, and she is confused as to her role, because in one breath she'll want to find him St. Joseph's aspirins, chewable aspirins somewhere because he's sick. And in another breath, she'll push him down because he's annoyed her and they've gotten in a fight and she's acting like a child because she is a child. And that is a constant tension in the book. That's a constant inside of her,
Yeah.
her feelings about herself. Yeah.
And no one has told her to do this. No one has told her it's her responsibility to take care of her little brother because no one tells her anything. They're just
they're getting no guidance.
Yeah, they have no guidance whatsoever, but she constantly feels like she's failing at the task that she assigned to herself. They end up on a boat with some very bad people at one point, and she says, I got furious with myself for being stupid and childish enough to let us get stranded again in the elements. And she had no responsibility in creating that situation, but she still feels here as a 12-year-old, like, I should have planned better. I should have done better by City to protect him. And I mean, that to me is the heart of this book, is the sibling relationship. And do you have siblings?
I do. I have 4.
Okay.
4 siblings, but I'm from sort of a divorce and step family. So I have one little brother who's a year and 11 months younger than me, who definitely, there's threads of him for sure in City. And he and I are the 2 children from my mother's first marriage. And then I have 2 stepsisters who have been my stepsisters since I was 5. And so, and they were 7 and 10. And then I have one baby brother that my mother and my stepfather had together. We've all been together as a family since I was 5 years old. So we don't really have those distinctions. Everybody's just brothers and sisters, and nobody really, whether there's infighting or feuds within or people who like people more or not within the sibling dynamic, nobody is like, well, he's only my half brother or she's only my stepsister. That's never, my parents eliminated that from the very, that's never been a thing. I even feel like I have 2 dads, I just have 2 dads. We don't make those distinctions.
Well, kudos to your parents for creating that situation, but it's fascinating to me. So, I mean, like I said, really at the heart of this book is the sibling relationship and all the things that happen to City and Sienna and the ways that it just brings them closer and the ways they feel responsible for each other and resentful of each other. I'm an only child, so that kind of dynamic is always really fascinating to me. And so Jenny, growing up with Jenny, which I feel like we did because we met in freshman year of college, so we were still kids, but she's one of 4 kids and has lots of cousins and a big family. I have a very small family aside from being an only child. I have 2 cousins, 2 aunts, and uncle. That's it. So there's something about that family dynamic that I never experienced directly, and so it's always fascinating to me when I see it in literature.
Yeah, there's real ups and downs to it. Like if you're an only child, then no one ever got mad at you and dipped your underwear in the sink water and then put it in the ice cube tray. But also, if you're an only child, no one ever dipped your underwear in ice water and put it in the ice cube tray. So it's like you never really, it's a good and a bad thing equally.
The fun and the trauma, right?
Yeah, the fun and the trauma are like, they're completely linked. Like the hardest laughs in the world come from the worst pains,
Absolutely.
So it's hard to, I have so many dear close friends who are only children or who have only children nowadays. And it's so amazing to see because being from a family with 2 children, I think, or 3 children is different than being with a family of 5. In a way, if you're in a family of 5 plus, you're also a neglect focus of your parents all the time. 2 parents only focus all the time. That's a lot of pressure. I feel like that's a lot of pressure. So when you're I'm the middle child of a family of 5, there was a lot of times I could be invisible, and that was a good thing sometimes,
It is a lot of pressure. And also I say jokingly, not jokingly, that I still have only child syndrome to this day, which is I need everybody to approve of me and like me best. And I joke mostly, but Jenny has this other friend, Christine.
Love you, Christine.
Who lives down the street from her. And meanwhile, I live very far away. And so I'm always like, oh, okay, Christine. I'm sure Christine is a lovely human being. And I am very grateful to her for having been a good friend to Jenny and being supportive during times that she needed it. But I'm also jealous as hell that she might like somebody better than she likes me. So I'm sorry, Christine. She doesn't like you more than she likes me. Close, but not.
I I think also there's your best friends who you probably have both of this going on with her, but there's your best friends who know your
Oh
every
yeah.
humiliating, all the things, how your armpits smelled when you were 12. And then there's your friends who know you now as a mother, as a community member, as a whatever, and they can like hear the stories of all of that and share it, and you can have that in common. But there's just something about those friends that know every dumb thing you ever did. And yeah, that's a
Yes,
special bond.
it is for sure.
I love the nostalgia in this book. And like you said, it's taking place in the 1980s. And there are a lot of situations that are relatable because this is when we grew up, but they just wouldn't be now because everybody would be on their smartphone and none of these things would be happening. But so Jenny and I often talk about how we're super grateful that we started college in 1993. So all of the shenanigans that we partook in as dumb college students are undocumented.
What shenanigans? We didn't have any
They're not yet.
shenanigans.
They have not been recorded or screenshotted or posted. It's fantastic.
It's like,
I
you know,
love
the nurse thing. If it's not documented, it didn't happen.
Exactly.
it.
Right?
It didn't happen.
Never
As far
happened.
as the
I don't know
internet knows, there were no
talking
shenanigans.
about
That's right.
what you're talking about. I wasn't even there. Can't prove it. You can't prove it.
That's right.
So
That's true.
I wanted to ask you about the title of the book. And so this is just my theory. It's my fan theory that I'm going to ask you now. So this goes back to talking about how Sienna just longs to be normal. And as she gets older and she's a teenager and she actually makes some friends and eventually meets a boy, she realizes in a way that she didn't maybe when she was 5 or 6 or 7 earlier in the novel, the way that her family is perceived by people outside the little Jackson love cult. And so she says, we weren't tennis people or Volvo people or people who lettered in lacrosse or people who had any Grey Poupon. And I hadn't had a vast experience of the upper classes, but I watched Facts of Life and I knew I was more of a Joe than a Tootie, Natalie, or Blair. How could I possibly have been surprised by being called garbage? I was surprised, though, that she saw the truth so easily, and it made me feel naked in a bad way. So there is a lot of literal nakedness in this book between their love cult and the ashram in the Catskills where they briefly live. But that when I read that part, I was like, oh, that's the naked girl. Was that your intention?
Yeah, so the book actually had a different title originally
Oh.
because I really love, and I think all titles they should always have a double entendre, every title of every book. And I examine this and I care about it. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't. They'll write, love song as the title of an amazing song. And I always love some really meaningful title because it's fun to think about where the author got it from. And so the original title was The Family Jones, which their last name is Jones. So that would be literal, and it's about their family. And then jonesing, like, there's a lot to do with marijuana and drugs in the book. And when you're jonesing for something normal, when you're jonesing for drugs, so I liked that title. And then I felt before I was publishing at the last minute, I felt that title is not the right title for this book because this book is about these kids and it's about Sienna mainly. And it needs to be a more internal title. And yes, your meaning, that's also my meaning, that she is literally and figuratively naked and she feels exposed in a way to herself and to the world that is just painful for her.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Thank you.
All right. We got to talk about Nana. So Nana only makes certain cameo appearances in the book. Nana is not exactly what I would call a constant character. And that's sort of Nana's thing, right? So at one point, Sienna says, of course, Nana showed up in a pinch. That was her big move. She wouldn't do much more, but she always showed up with a strong opinion and a bag of not very good food, not such a bad little something to count on. So Nana is infuriating. Nana is Jackson's mother.
Yeah.
Nana knows full well what is going on in that household. And Sienna, for a long time, fantasizes that Nana will come and take them away. And Aunt Paula is also sometimes there. Aunt Paula is the maker of excellent food, But of course, Nana and Paula are complicated in their own ways. But I just wanted to grab Nana and shake her and say, do something for these kids. But you also mentioned to me that Nana was the most fun dialogue to write. She's very much kind of the archetype of the Jewish grandma, and she's a lot of fun.
The mean Jewish grandma, like the Jewish grandma who's had it already, not the sweet one, who always makes delicious old recipes from the old country. She's just more like, enough already. She's had it. She's woke up at the end of her fuse. She lives at the end of her fuse. Yeah.
She's almost like a character on Seinfeld.
Yeah, she is totally of a Costanza. And the thing about Nana for me is she is, when I think about who she is from a generation where, first of all, if you wanted to have sex, you had to get married. Second of all, you were probably 19 or 20 when you got married to the very first serious or even remotely serious boyfriend who walked up in a uniform at some dance. And then like 3 dates later, you're engaged. And that's how it worked. So sometimes it worked well, sometimes it didn't. And I don't think that Nana was someone who really enjoyed or loved being a mother herself. So even though she may know full well what's going on, the kids don't know she knows what's going on. They think that they're hiding it from her because they're children. And she's hiding it from herself, I think, because she's like, look at the job she did with Jackson and Aunt Paula raising her own kids. You think now she's going to take on someone else's damaged kids and do that all over again? Like, she already didn't want to do the job the first time, and now she's supposed to come do the job again with some even more damaged kids with no partner.
Yeah, she's done. She wants to play canasta with her friends in her retirement community, and that's it.
So she's good for some Chinese food sometimes and a day out.
Yeah. Which is painful too, because just imagine like somebody who's supposed to be a safe adult in your life walking in, witnessing the chaos that you're living in, giving you a little bit of, General Tso's chicken, and then leaving without you. I think there's one point where Sienna is packing her suitcase, hoping that Nana's going to take her in city, and then Nana just drives away.
Think at that point, Nana was just fed up with the whole situation that was going on in the house and wasn't even thinking about the children or her promise when she was leaving. She was completely focused on getting out and, herself.
Yeah.
So that compartmentalization is a common in this family.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Everybody has an ability to see only what they want to see. Yeah.
To justify what they want to do. Yeah.
Yes. And then maybe the most heartbreaking thing is the way that Jackson is just sort of, in a way, he is the all-powerful controller of everything that happens to these kids. But on the other hand, he's just there on the periphery, not involved in any father type way. But even much later, when Sienna is an older teenager, she still has the fantasy that someone will show up and parent her in the way that she needs to be parented. And she says she has this idea where she's considering going away someplace. And she says, the expectation was for Jackson to look at me and see that despite his manifold failures, I'd grown into someone functional, good, maybe even beautiful. And at this realization, he'd choke up and say, I am so proud of you, Munchie. I know that I super sucked and I'm sorry. I'll do better. It'll be different from now on. Please, please don't go. And that's so sad. I think she's 17 at this point, and she's still like longing for her daddy to say, okay, I did a terrible job, but you did a great job. And let's start all over again. Let me be your dad for real now. And that was so sad.
It's so sad. And I think that we all have, I think everybody's experienced something like that, either with a husband or ex-boyfriend or just a boss or parent, like where you're just like, I turned myself inside out for this. How are you not seeing that or acknowledging that or appreciating that I did better than you here, that I rose to cover up your failures? Like, I worked really hard. Even after the fact, you're not going to acknowledge that. I think that's a common feeling that people experience.
Yeah.
It's so disappointing. Yeah.
So this is your debut novel, hopefully not your last. So what's next? Are you working on something else? Also, is there going to be an audiobook version of Naked Girl?
There is already an audiobook version of Naked Girl. It's out on Audible and everywhere you would get your audiobooks. Apple, like everywhere that has audiobooks, it's out everywhere.
Do you read it?
I'm the reader. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. I think I had someone reading it at first, an actor, and she was very good. And she just, I wasn't hearing my characters coming out of her. I was hearing what she envisioned the characters, and it just wasn't right. I couldn't get it. She was a lovely voice actress, but I just couldn't get it right. And so I ended up redoing it myself because I needed them to sound like them to me in order for it to fly. So it was really fun. I did it with Brett Barry at Silver Hollow Audio.
Oh, we know
it's
Brett from the
Yes.
Cats Cast
Yeah,
podcast.
Yeah, Jen, I meant to
fantastic
tell
from
you that.
Cats.
Yeah.
He has his own cat. Yeah, he's fantastic. His wife is also an author. She's fantastic. His dogs are adorable. Like you get to know, so because his studio is at his home, and so I worked with him for 4 days. It was such a great experience. I loved it, and I will say about Brett that there's another Hudson Valley podcaster from Matt Zucker from Cidiot.
We know
And
Matt.
he
Yeah.
told Brett that he has a handsome voice,
Yeah.
and I agree. He has a very handsome voice.
He does. We
So
talked
I
about that on our
recommend
podcast. We did a crossover with Cidiot, and
You
we
did.
talked about that.
That was
So-
like one of the major topics was
That's
Brett
so funny.
Barry's
I
handsome
heard
voice.
that and I was like, "That's it. You nailed it."
I know
That's
it's
what
the
he has.
perfect description. So if
It
you
is.
if you narrate the audiobook, can you give us just a little Nana? How do you read Nana's dialogue?
Oh, she would say something like, "What are you talking about, sweetheart? What's the matter with you? Where are you going? What are you doing?" Sort of like that. That's how she
Nailed
sounds.
it.
Yeah.
The way,
Love
even the
that.
way you write "sweetheart" in the
enough.
book, it's so good.
Sweetheart, I've had enough. Yeah, and I think
Oh,
there's
I've had
one
many
line.
family members.
Yeah. That like if you don't register with Nana, if she calls you dear, like unless you hit sweetheart, you're nothing to her. If she's not calling you sweetheart, you're nothing to her. That's how you can indicate. Yeah.
And it's
she's
giving
a lot.
Grandma Esther, Jenny, just so you know.
A little bit. Yeah. A little bit.
I think a lot of people have at least one grandparent parent who's just had it. They're done. They're done.
Or some
She just
tante
wants to get
and
done.
somebody in the family, some New York Jewish family member somewhere.
And I want to say to those women that are in such a rush to get done, I'm like, at the end we die. Like at the end, everyone just dies. Where are you going? What are you in such a rush about?
Yeah.
Sit down, relax, have a cup of coffee,
Very good.
Yeah, people are rushing through that Nana. She's busy. She needs to get done.
Yeah. So what's coming next? Are you working on something else? I know you also do short stories.
I do short stories. I have several short stories published. If you Google Janna Brooke Wallack and look for short stories, they'll come up if you scroll down past the book stuff. They've just been in a bunch of literary journals, and I was doing that for years. I have another novel. It's not finished. I feel I need to rewrite the entire thing, but it's also it's a little bit strange because it's both that sort of like small dysfunctional family fiction, but it's also speculative fiction because it mostly takes place on Mars.
Oh.
And but it's like a small claustrophobic character-driven story that takes place between the first settlers of Mars.
Ooh,
That
Yeah,
sounds great.
I like it.
Well, when you're done, you're going to come back and we'll talk about that one.
Yeah, working title is America Go Mars is the working title so far.
Nice.
Right now. Yeah.
Also, so I am nosy in a way that I love to read every word of the acknowledgments in people's books. And
I do too.
I also think I saw this maybe on your Instagram, but you gave thanks to Karen Russell, and I think you posted something with her. That's Karen Russell, like the Karen Russell, the writer.
Karen,
Wow.
she's amazing, and she's deeply one of my favorite writers because she also goes into the world of the mind and the child in an incredible way, specifically in her novel Swamplandia and in her short stories, which I love.
I love her short stories.
And I got to work with her at a literary conference. Yeah, I love her short stories. They're amazing. And I got to work with her for a week in a workshop in Italy. Actually, it was one of the most privileged and magnificent things I ever did. The workshop's called Siren Land. And it's run by actually Michael Marin, Danny Shapiro, and Jim Shepard, also 3 amazing artists. Danny Shapiro is a really pretty famous memoirist, and Jim Shepard's an incredible writer. And his wife, Karen Shepard, who's also a writer. and all of these people are there every year. I think it's been going on now for 15 years.
Wow.
And at the 10th anniversary, I was there, and Karen Russell was my workshop leader, and it was remarkable. And she's also a Miami girl. She's younger than me. She's like 10 years younger than me or more. And so she's different. She's like a 90s, like of the age of where people had beepers and beeper codes. And I never had that phase. But she's like just a deeply genius writer and editor. And she marked up one of my short stories, which actually is the short story that America Go Mars will be based on. And it's a short story called Ick, and it takes place on Mars, and it's published. I still have my draft with her notes on it, because it's like so exciting to me to have her. Yeah.
That's very cool. She's a great writer. Also, speaking of Florida and your Florida roots, do we love Lauren Groff?
Yes, I love Lauren Groff. She's amazing. But you'll be surprised to know that I did not discover Lauren Groff until after I wrote my book.
Huh.
So she wrote a book called Acadia that does take place like in a sort of commune setting, a hippie commune situation, like a living off the land, which is somewhat happening in my story. And it's in Florida. I think maybe, I don't know if that one's in Florida. She has other books based in Florida, but I read it a long time ago. But I was reading it going, oh God, I don't hope someone doesn't think I was copying this, which it's completely dissimilar, but she's amazing. And I didn't discover her till after. I actually just finished her book, Vaster Wilds, which was a remarkable, seems like maybe she started it as almost an experiment. Like, how can I write like historical fiction that takes place, that's so simple, that takes place in the 1600s. And it's pretty amazing.
She's fabulous. And my favorite thing about her is that she just opened a bookstore in Florida that is specifically geared towards selling all the banned books that Florida would rather not have you read. So
I did not know that yet, and I love to know that. I feel like mine would fall in that category if it was more well known. So I should probably write her a letter and thank her. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Any book that starts out with a young girl looking at a picture of her dad's penis probably is not
in the second
Florida
sentence,
reading
I'm out of there. Yeah. And it only gets worse from there. So yeah. Many trigger warnings, apparently. Like, I've had some good reviews from Bookstagram and things like that, and really some nice reviewers, but a lot of them have like a trigger warning on them.
Yes.
For reading.
Yes, that is true. There are things that are difficult, but all of the difficult things that happen to your characters also feel very necessary. There was nothing in there that I felt like, well, that was gratuitous. Why did she have that happen? I mean, it all needed to happen for the plot. So
I appreciate.
Before we let you go, I want to ask you some fun questions. Fun questions that I love to ask fellow book nerds.
Yes.
First of all, so you are not always from the Hudson Valley, but you're well settled in the Hudson Valley now. Do you have a favorite place to write in the Hudson Valley, or a place that you like to go when you need to recharge and get some inspiration?
Yes, totally two different places. So I lived in Stone Ridge for a long time. I don't anymore. And I loved, and it's so funny, there's this little restaurant in Stone Ridge that is just a really open, airy, wonderful space. And I wrote all over the place, which I'm sure every writer in the Hudson Valley like eventually settles. But I love, and this place was first called Jack and Luna's when I moved there. And then it was called Lecker, and now it's called Hash. And it is consistently delicious, amazing food. And it's just like a really, almost like I would describe the decor, like the design as sort of like Swedish modern. So it's just a lot of glass and a really high white ceiling, and it's really open, and it just feels airy and fresh. And sometimes it's open air. So in the warm months, I really love to go right in there. And actually in the winter, I loved to go right in there.
Jack and Luna was actually, when I was going to nursing school, when it was Jack and Luna, that was my go-to hideaway study spot when I had to write a paper, when I had to do whatever. That was my spot. It's amazing. Love it. And I've been to it since it's Hash also, but amazing. So I can see that.
Yeah, I love that. I like Bread Alone in Rhinebeck. I like Taste Buds in Red Hook. I went to libraries a lot because it was quiet. I love Rough Draft is a great place to sit and write. Just places that don't chase you out, and they really invite and enjoy writers being in there. Gives me a good vibe. So yeah, a lot of good right around places to recharge. The very top at Mohonk, after you go up the Montague Rocks and you get to the top and you're looking out at the big view, that always fills me with joy. I love that. And I actually live in Red Hook, but I live outside of Red Hook in a town called Elizaville. And I don't want to advertise them because you need some sort of town permit to use them anyway, but there's lakes there. And it's really, really peaceful to sit on a dock and look at the lake. And I have these two. Just this year, there's a one-eyed 40-year-old snapping turtle that comes to visit and feed him fruit. And then there's these two vagabond ducks that are farm ducks that are super friendly, and they swim across. I just love all of the Hudson River Valley is so beautiful and just like overwhelming with the beautiful nature and just relaxing vistas. And I sometimes will be driving home in my car and go into a meditation from the sunset over the bridge. Either it's in the front or the back of my car, and the sunsets are so incredible. Even the sunset outside of Target is like awe-inspiring. Why did they build that stuff there on
That
Ulster
is
Avenue? It's like
well
the best.
known to be one of the most incredible sunset spots in this
Yeah.
area is the Target parking lot. The Hudson Valley
Target
Mall is
parking
like,
lot sunset is unrivaled
yes,
in the Hudson Valley.
it
I
really
can't like
is.
it's a terrible place for them to have put. I can't imagine. I just go back to when it was farmland and just think you could sit there and see the universe. It's so
I
amazing.
know.
Is it because
Yeah.
it's up on that rise?
Yeah, it's up on the rise, and just because of the direction of the parking lot, it looks over the Catskills. It's absolutely beautiful. So
Like
like
how
this,
many
yeah,
musty, dark places are there that they could have built the office park and the Target and the big box stores that they built them in? This is the best view. It's
it is.
incredible.
It is.
Well done, Target.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Target. All right. Is there a book that you have read that made you literally laugh out loud?
Yes, a couple. Maria Semple's books, anything she wrote. She's amazing. She wrote "Where Have You Gone, Bernadette?" and "Where Did You Go, Bernadette?" I want
Yeah.
to say it correctly. And this one is mine, and I think there's another one.
Today Will Be Different.
Today Will Be Different. She's hilarious. She makes me laugh out loud. Lena Dunham makes me laugh out loud. She wrote a book called Not That Kind of Girl. I love her. I really relate to that. What other really funny? I actually read some stand-up comedian memoirs, and I love doing that. Yeah. Very punchable.
Samantha Irby will make you laugh so hard that you can't breathe.
I have not read her. I will read her. I love laugh out loud. I love funny. Yeah. It's fantastic.
So Maria Semple's book, Today Will Be Different, there's this passage in it that I am obsessed with. It's a novel, but she's talking about, this is like on page 40, if you have the book, she's talking about how in every couple or just, two-person relationship, there's the competent traveler and the helpless traveler. And so, you can think of the helpless traveler as like the passenger princess. Like there's the competent traveler who knows where you have to be and when you have to be there and, how you're getting there. And then there's the helpless traveler who's just walking around looking for snacks. And it's such a great metaphor for relationships and the way that you take care of your partner. And ideally you have a relationship where you get to trade off being the helpless traveler and the competent traveler. And I think Jenny and I are really good at that, because we'll have times when I'm melting down and being like, why doesn't anybody listen to our podcast? And I don't like this episode. And she's like, it's okay. We've only been doing this for 3 months and this episode's really good. And then she'll have times when she's like, I'm so overwhelmed and I'm getting impatient. And I'm like, you know what? We're doing a lot. And so we have a good trade-off of getting to each have our turn being helpless and competent.
Yes. The analogy I always think of, and it's very Gen X centric, is from Project X with Matthew Broderick, the monkey, and they're just like holding his hand, and he's a chimp, and he's just walking, holding hands, and he's walking toward his end, very like bad. He's just trusting and walking, and someone's holding his hand up here. And I agree. Like you need your sisters and your friends who are sister-like, and your brothers and your partner to be able to switch off, because you need to be able to be the helpless child sometimes, and then you need to be able to direct sometimes. I like that. That's a really good definition. I have that with my friends too, and sisters.
All right. So the opposite of the book that makes you laugh out loud, is there one that just wrecked you emotionally? And I have to say, I was very scared for a few minutes there in naked girl that you were about to wreck me with something that happened, but it turned out okay. But you know what I mean. I'm not going to spoil
Yeah,
it.
I do.
But so do you have a book like that you're like, I will never recover from that?
Yeah, and it's a childhood book, and I reread it to my kids, and it like they didn't get it at all. And it's Where the Red Fern Grows. That
Oh,
book.
yeah.
So it's the little boy and his two little hounds that he saves up all his money and buys these two hounds to go coon hunting with him. And he lives through the whole life of the hounds. And maybe I shouldn't spoil the book, but it just it has a really sad but inspiring ending. And I actually I had two hounds at some point in my life. And I think it came from that. I read it when I was 11, and and I've always been a reader, and it's the first book that made me cry, like really cry. Like I was 11 and I finished it and I put it down and I burst into tears. And it's still, if I think about it, I get just all the feels and just really filled with like happy sads.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my husband has had a thing when my stepson was born. He started like buying him picture books, different children's books that he really loves, and he's continued. He just turned 12, and the collection of books that we have for us is just insane. But some of the books that we have collected, I mean, and I had some, they were repeats from, as you know, from Micah and Nava, who are turning 20, by the way, in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yes. So some of them are repeats, some of them, newer ones that have come out. And I have to say, like, that question is like, what books have wrecked you? I would say the majority of books that have made me feel like that have been books from childhood or these newer childhood books that, the kids are like, that's a nice picture book. And meanwhile, like, we'll sit on the couch and do story time and we'll like read to Andrew. And then like he's reading it, like, and he'll look over at me and I'm just like, oh, like I'm just tears streaming down my face. So many children's books. Beautiful, beautiful. Not necessarily sad. Some are sad, not necessarily sad, but so gut wrench. It's just so emotional. I get very emotional about children's books.
You're reminding me that I thought I was doing this great thing going into this is like, I don't know, 15 years ago, going into my no, it's more than 15 years ago because today is my daughter's 23rd birthday. Happy birthday, Claire. Yeah, and so I have my son is just a little bit younger than her, and I went into his kindergarten class back when we lived in Hoboken, New Jersey. And I thought it was going to be this wonderful thing like around Mother's Day. And they asked me to come read a book, and I read The Giving Tree.
No.
And in real time reading it, I'm
Ugh.
like, this is a terrible book. Like I had never read it as a mother.
Oh, that
I
one
hadn't
makes me
really read
cry.
it, and I hadn't really read it as a
Hmm.
mother. And I'm reading it as a mother, and I'm like, number one, this is utterly accurate, and I can't believe it was written by a man. And number two, this is a gut wrench. And the
Yes.
children were depressed, but like it was a total
But
fail.
that you
Total
said right
fail.
there, I think there's so many books that rereading it as a mother,
Oh my God.
totally different perspective, completely different.
I was
Yes.
like, of course you're happy to be a stump with him sitting on you. Of course you are.
Yep.
That's
Oh,
perfect. That
even like
sums it
simple
up
ones
right
like the goodbye kiss. Is that what it's called? That the goodbye kiss with
there. The kissing
the
hand.
kissing hand, not the goodbye kiss, the
Yeah.
kissing hand. Oh, you know what I'm talking about. Well,
Yeah, well, so I read that mostly to my youngest son, and he loved it. And he loved it because he had nothing for the sweet, emotional kissing hand story. But when I turned it into the pooping hand or the farting hand,
hmm.
then it just laughed his brains out the entire time. Completely lost on him the emotional journey of the book. Couldn't care less at all about the mother-child relationship, but just putting the toilet words in there
Oh,
really.
is that
Yeah, it was
Shep? Was that for Shep?
Shep.
Yeah, but
Yep,
he is like
Shep.
the sweetest boy ever. So you got
Thank
to give
you
it to him for
so
that.
much.
He is the
He's now
sweetest
Poop
boy
and
ever.
15.
farts are
But
always funny, no matter who you
yeah,
are.
toilet humor, it's like it wins every time with
Yeah.
toddlers, and yeah,
You know what? And
it's tough.
for 48-year-old women too. So it's fine.
Yeah.
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 I mean, fart jokes are good. If a well-timed fart joke completely works. It's true.
All
We're
right.
not above.
Last question. What are you reading now? Or what's your summer reading wish list?
Okay. I have not started it yet. I've been intending to start it for 3 days, and my life has been hectic, and it's like I'm feeling this itch that I haven't been reading for a while. But I am currently reading, but they were Portnoy's Complaint. That's the book. I found it in a used bookstore in the Village for a couple of bucks, and I was like, I have never read this. This is probably one of those books that will be in Lauren Groff's bookstore.
Mhm.
And the very first page of the book, and I won't ruin it, it just defines Portnoy's complaint, the term Portnoy's complaint, and it's something sexual. And I was like, I've never read this banned book. I got to read this book. So that's the top of my TBR, like with me wherever I'm going, as soon as I sit down to read. I'm also listening to James McBride's Heaven and Earth Grocery Store,
Okay.
which is a big hit, and it's truly beautiful. And I guess for someone who wants like a page turner with like plot and, you know, like a real genre reader, it's not that type of thing. It's literary fiction, and it is the story of the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store and the whole journey from the old neighborhood to the new world, going back and forth in time, and all of this Jewish and Black neighborhood called Chicken Hill, I think in Philadelphia, and its journey over time around this one little store, the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. And it's remarkable, and I'm really deep in it, and I love it. My summer reading TBR, I'm such a mood reader that no matter what I say I'm intending to read, when I finish a book, I will just grab like whatever the nearest. Sometimes I'll reread something I've read before, or I'll just walk into the bookstore like an addict that we
Yeah.
all are, the lovers,
Yeah.
walk into the bookstore or a book sale or the library and like stare at the covers and decide what's calling to me.
I feel like
Yeah.
it's not up to us. I
Yeah.
feel like you don't get a choice. I always say it's like, you know, in Harry Potter when he goes to the wand store and Ollivander says, the wand chooses the wizard, Harry. And that's what I feel like. I mean, I have
Good.
hundreds of books in my house that I have not yet read, but I needed them when I acquired them. But it'll just be like, I will look at a particular book on a shelf hundreds of times, and then suddenly one day it'll be like a spotlight is shining on that book. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's time for that book. And it always is. It
Yeah.
always ends up being like, yes, this is exactly the book I needed right now, and I didn't know.
You know what you're making me think of? It's such a modern thing to be like a bibliophile um, because it's only a new thing that not everybody has to read to get their information. It's like a very, you know, only 100 years old or less, you know, whatever, 50-year-old thing that everybody's not reading as their entertainment.
Yeah.
And so the idea that there's these people that stuck with it when there's so much easier media that's just there for you and does all the work for you, and you don't have to sit down, you don't have to concentrate, you don't have to use your brain, it's doing it for you. That the people who really stick with it and still love it are this sort of unstudied new subgroup of humans. And I haven't really figured out yet what bonds us, people who really need to sit down and stare at the words on the page. And I posted something the other day that you want to like sniff that old book smell,
Yeah.
library smell. I think
Even
everybody,
a new book smell, just paper, ink. I love it.
just looking at all the different cover art and seeing the stack on my desk and deciding sometimes just based on cover art which book I want to read next.
Yeah.
Or I feel like your next book is based on like your last conversation or your last big thought, you know.
Yeah.
So whatever you were intending, you can veer from that because someone will mention something. And I'm sorry, what was the name of the author, the comedy author that you mentioned?
Oh, Samantha Irby.
Samantha Irby. So now I'm going to go look at Samantha Irby, and she might kick Portnoy's complaint down a notch because I want to laugh.
Well,
You
and
know,
also it's like the quickie essays. They're all hilarious. I think Wow, No Thank You is probably the first one that I read, and she has We Are Never Meeting in Real Life. But they're all hilarious, and you can like intersperse it with a more serious novel that you're reading too. You could just, you know,
Yeah.
dive in and get like a 10-minute hit of humor. But also, by the way, Naked Girl's cover art is gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's like this very lush, evocative, like South Florida kind of moment that you get just from the artwork.
Thank you. I worked with a designer named Susan Olinsky. She's super talented. And that was like on her first pass. I sent her some photos from actually my dad's landscaping, and they're just some close-up photos of different spots in my dad's landscaping in South Florida. And then I said, it would be cool to have the lettering be sort of lush like a body,
Mm-hmm.
and in a flesh color. And then that's all I really told her. And then this was the first pass. I thought it was amazing. I really love looking at it.
I don't know if it's accidental, and I won't give anything away, but if you know, you know. I wonder if it's a coincidence that in the foreground you're at the base of a tree, because that's something that's gonna be significant.
I think that's a coincidence because I sent her multiple. I love that and I love that about readers too, right? Because when I wrote the book, everyone's like, well, the dad smokes a lot of pot and he calls the kids munchies. That wasn't intentional. Wasn't intentional. It's just a cute nickname that like Munchkins that I thought that he would call them. And this, I sent her many photos from this place and she chose this one and she hadn't read the book. So that's just a you discovery, Jen.
All right.
And I love it. Yeah.
Well,
That's great.
all right.
But I totally meant to do that because I'm that deep and
Yeah.
forward.
Subconsciously, you did mean
That
it.
was completely on purpose. Yes.
Yeah.
Nice job. Good. That's like a
Yes.
little, it's like a
Everything
little
you discovered
Easter
on the
egg.
book is completely by design. I'm a genius.
Well, thank you so much. This was so fun. This is the best
Oh.
possible interview for our very first literary Hudson Valley conversation. And I can't wait for you to write another novel or have your next short story published and come back and talk to us about it some more.
Thank you. Keep pressuring me to finish it. And thank you for letting me be your maiden voyage. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janna. Say hi to Shep for me.
I sure will.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.